Water is the lifeline of the West. That's why everything from farming to restaurants to your front lawn depends on our snowpack. Up next, Idaho News 6 takes an in-depth look at how the next couple of months will determine how we live our lives in Idaho.
I'm outdoor reporter Steve Denton. Idaho ski resorts have not got any meaningful snow in more than a month. I'm going to see what that means for Bogus Basin.
And I'm Chief Meteorologist Scott Drought. Coming up next, I'll have an in-depth look at where we stand right now as far as precipitation and moisture, plus the forecast into the future. Is it enough to hold off a multi-year drought for the state?
This is Idaho News 6 with Karen Lair, Don Nelson, and Roland Veris.
Hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Good evening, I'm Don Nelson with this special Idaho News 6 newscast dealing with our water supply outlook for this year and beyond. Farmers, ranchers, restaurants, and recreation, Idaho's most precious natural resource is water. I'm on the banks of Lucky Peak Reservoir just about 10 minutes east of Boise. Built in the 1950s, initially the Lucky Peak Dam served a safety role. Flood control, keeping heavy spring rains from overflowing the banks and drowning property downstream along the Boise River. Now this reservoir and Arrow Rock Reservoir, 15 miles up the river, hold the lifeblood of our high desert climate. All this water allows farmers to thrive, fishermen and rafters to enjoy the river, and you can keep your lawn green even when the temperatures are high. The Idaho Water Supply Committee met today to assess snowpack levels, runoff potential, and the water outlook for the coming months. From the fall and into early winter, we were optimistic rain and snow would possibly bust the ongoing drought in southwest Idaho that we have been experiencing. Tonight, that conclusion is not so certain.
But we're getting to a point that we're probably going to start to recommend an expansion of drought in Idaho if we don't see the needed precip start coming in.
The reservoir system is 40% full. That's all three reservoirs combined. Now, to put that into perspective, we're 20% below normal for this time of the year. And coming up, meteorologist Scott Dorval will have a look at the rest of this year and see how that all pans out. But now let's check in with reporter Bella Bright, who is examining how Idaho farmers are adapting to drier summers and the threat of an extended drought.
With Idaho's long-lasting drought unlikely to end this year, local farmers are feeling impacts that could in turn hurt those who rely on fresh local produce. We spoke with the seed farmer about what the drought means for his farm. Fourth-generation Weiser farmer Tristan Weinegar is committed to his family farm, despite challenges. But last year's hot, dry spring was discouraging. As a state that relies heavily on agriculture, lack of water takes a huge toll.
Last year it was windy in the spring, no moisture, and it was hot, 110 degrees or so hot. And besides that, you have the uncertainty of the markets, and then uncertainty of water. And if we don't have water, we can't grow our crops and people can't eat.
Predictions of another drier than normal spring indicate there won't be much relief from the drought.
Now, drought is something that's mostly out of our control, but we do the best that we can to control the controllables. So we're doing irrigation like drip and pivots and stuff like that to try and conserve water and inputs and fertilizer, etc. But there's only so much you can do with the water that we've been given every year.
If the drought persists, it could force big changes to the state as we know it.
Because we grow so much seed here in the Treasure Valley, we can't afford to have 2 or 3 years in a row of drought. And that'll mean that we'll have to grow the seed somewhere else because the seed is so important.
It's not just farmers feeling the impacts of a limited water supply. It's also impacting how Idahoans spend their time in the outdoors. Our Steve Dent has more about how ski resorts are adjusting and planning ahead for the future.
Idaho ski resorts got off to a beautiful start with so much snow in December. I'm outdoor reporter Steve Dent, and I'm up here at Bogus Basin, who hasn't got any meaningful snow in more than a month. So I sat down with the general manager to see how that's impacting this nonprofit resort.
Which started off huge, and we're well over average. We're now just slightly below average in snowfall. There is snow expected next week, but I'm not going to hold my breath. We've been told that before.
Check out the difference in snow from December to the same shot taken today. But Brad Wilson says the lack of snow hasn't discouraged skiers and snowboarders from visiting the mountain. When tickets went on sale Wednesday night for Saturday, Bogus Basin had 23 fewer tickets sold this week compared to last week.
Which is just a minuscule amount. So business is holding up well. I think people love the weather. They love the fact that the road is pretty much dry and easy to come up.
To counteract the lack of snow, Bogus Basin has used snowmaking machines to build new terrain park features. And they say they've done more grooming this year than ever before.
It is beautiful up here. The scenery is gorgeous. They do a great job of grooming.
But I also asked Brad Wilson if he has concerns for the future of skiing and snowboarding because of climate change. And he told us that's why Bogus Basin has invested $10 million in snowmaking equipment.
But I think overall, it's not time to panic yet, but we're planning, in best case scenarios, you plan for the worst and expect the best. And we're going to get there. We're going to make sure that we can handle the worst of times, and in the best of times, we'll be in a great shape.
And that's just kind of the way the ski industry looks at the lack of snow, taking a look at the positives, like the cleared roads going up and down to Bogus Basin and enjoying this bluebird day. Steve Dent, Idaho News 6.
I'm Good Morning Idaho's weather anchor Frankie Catafias with some history of the drought here in Idaho. From wildfires to farming water, it runs through every aspect of gem state life. Idaho has experienced a number of water shortages, and the earliest documented during the Dust Bowl era between the 20s and 30s. 1977 was the worst single year on record for a statewide water shortage, and for the next decade, water supply was below normal, but good reservoir carryover supplies kept impacts minimal for farmers and their crops. Then in 1990, the state finally took action by developing the Idaho Water Supply Committee. It was helping to ensure adequate and appropriate distribution for one of Idaho's most vital resources.
Well, when we lack that precious resource, of course, the drought situation gets worse. Let's take a look at a loop from last year to where we are now. This was last year, less than 25% of the state under any type of drought, which was great. Then we had a very dry autumn and a hot and dry summer. That created the drought and exacerbated it across all of the Northwest and the West. Exceptional drought over 25% of the state. The Big Wood, the Wood River and up into the Lost Basins was the worst location in northern Idaho. Then we had the heavy snows in December and somewhat of a removal of a good portion of the drought. And now you see here no exceptional drought over Idaho, which is great news, but the Water Committee is thinking about recommending expanding the drought because it has been so dry over the last month. Let's look at the water situation in our reservoir system. 3 reservoirs. You've got Anderson Ranch, Arrow Rock, and Lucky Peak. You put them all together, it's 40% full right now. That's 20% below normal and 24% below where we were last year at this time. How much water's in the snowpack locked in there close to normal, but we've been losing ground because we haven't had that moisture. So these numbers are pretty good, but the latest stream flow forecasts are not good. They're getting close to average, but maybe dropping below average through much of the Northwest. After a promising start to the season, it just does not look as good. So the forecast here, spring of 2022, we may have above normal precipitation for northern Idaho and Washington from March, and then the drier air is going to start to move its way in. California, we go into summertime, it's dry anyway, but even then below normal precipitation and probably a very hot, dry summer again, unfortunately. Next autumn, the trend, if we look out that far, right now looks like below normal, and that critical time next winter, early indications, this can change, but early indications show that we would still have a chance of going below normal again. And these multi-seasons of having below normal precipitation will unfortunately help to develop what experts are concerned about, a multi-year drought once again.
Saving water can be easy for most homeowners. The biggest savings comes from watering your yard efficiently, but because it's winter right now, the best tip is to check for leaks this time of year. A leaky toilet can waste literally thousands of gallons a month. So it's important and really easy to check your toilets for leaks.
You can discover if your toilet's leaking just by adding a couple of drops of food coloring into the toilet tank and then wait for about 20 minutes. See if it shows up in the toilet bowl. And if it does show up in the bowl, then you've got a leak.
Also, don't wash your dishes by hand. Most dishwashers built in the last 20 years use far less water. And Bush says consider getting low-flow shower heads, too. New technology aerates the water, making it feel like the same pressure as before.
And I'm Chief Meteorologist Scott Drought. Coming up next in my forecast, I'm going to talk about how high pressure will finally start to back off a little bit, and that'll open the gates for a little snow coming in. I'll tell you how much we can expect of the mountains in my forecast next.
Meteorologist Scott Dorval with the Idaho News 6 forecast.
All those high temperatures, again, near 60 in Boise today. Pretty impressive warmth coming on in, and it's nice, it's comfortable. That feels really good in February, but it's the bigger picture's not all that great because you have a lot more excessive heat to the south and west. It got to the low 80s in Brookings, actually 84 degrees in Brookings, Oregon, right here on the coastline, just in from the coastline. And you go down south, further south into California, not a good scene because another fire starting today around Laguna Beach in Southern California and Orange County. All kinds of evacuations going on as Santa Ana winds are blowing because of that high pressure, which I'll show you. Look at these temperatures up to 30 degrees above normal and the sky clear. So very pleasant conditions in Bend today. It was 72 degrees with sunshine, but this big fat H right here, this big ridge of high pressure. Remember in the summertime we had that huge ridge come in, hit Canada, came across Idaho, and we had temperatures well above 100 degrees in places like Seattle and in Western Canada. Well, the ridge is still here and it's hanging on right now, and unfortunately it's bringing these Santa Ana winds, these winds whipping down through, going down the mountains and accelerating through the canyons, getting hot and drying out into Orange County again with the fire. We've had fires to the north, and I wouldn't doubt a few more fires starting as we speak because it's just such a high fire risk situation in Southern California with this ridge. Good news, ridge will start to back off a little bit. That'll take with it some of the heat, and it will open up the gates for a storm system developing here to take a little bit further southern route and bring a little bit of moisture in. It's also going to bring some cooling winds. It'll be wind, unfortunately, but cooler weather pushing down into Southern California is going to be a nice break for them. It's going to be temporary, though, because this is going to build right back on in. So here's the snow for central Idaho. Notice how north central Idaho, again, will be under the gun. The Clearwater Basin up in Idaho County here. This is where we see the better chance of that 4 to 8 inch range of snow on the higher peaks. McCall, an inch of snow, potentially. Bogus Basin, maybe an inch. I don't think you'll get much out of this, but Brundage and Tamarack could see upwards to 3 or 4 inches of snow out of this system coming on in. And the Stanley area may see some snow, probably not that much. Almost 50 degrees in Stanley today as well. Here's the McCall extended forecast for this weekend. We'll be near 40 degrees. Get a chance to get outside and enjoy it. Low temperatures cold, but boy, the afternoons have been amazing. It was 54 degrees up at Seasesh Meadows during the day today. Our storm system comes in during the day Monday as a mixture of rain and snow, trending towards snow showers and maybe some icy roads on Tuesday morning. Quick check at the forecast for the ski areas. There you see it, 1 to 4 inches of snow potentially. Treasure Valley forecast for tomorrow, a lot like today, maybe not 58, but I think we're going to be close to 50 and maybe a little bit above 50 degrees with sunshine developing as the day wears on. And even into the weekend, sunshine, 45 to 50. Looks nice, near 50 on Monday. Only a slight chance for a rain shower and staying mild into next week as well.
Well, we are just days away from Valentine's Day, and stores all across the country are stocking their shelves with sweet treats. And instead of the traditional chocolate bars or truffles, one Idaho native is reinventing the way the entire world makes hot cocoa. The cocoa bomb craze has been going strong for the last 2 years and was actually started by Boise State alumni Eric Torres Garcia. The confections took TikTok by storm in 2019 with a hard chocolate shell outside and marshmallows on the inside. Just pop it into a mug, pour your piping hot milk, and watch the bomb explode into a delicious cup of hot cocoa. Well, after Eric made his first promising prototype and shared that process on social media, success came quickly.
I posted that video around noon, and by like 7 or 8 p.m., it had over 1 million views, and I had sold like over $7,000 worth of product. I had only ever made one cocoa bomb.
Coming up in this week's Made in Idaho, I caught up with Eric over a cup of hot cocoa and learned more about his inspiration for the sweet treat and how his connections at Boise State were instrumental in helping him adjust to a booming business out of his hometown of Blackfoot. That's coming up tomorrow morning right here on Good Morning Idaho.
The Idaho News 6 Tower Cam Network is sponsored by Bronco Motors Hyundai. This is Idaho News 6.
New gun control measures advance in the Washington state legislature. Senators there voting to ban the manufacture, distribution, and sale of magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds of ammo. If the bill passes the House, it could affect not just rifles, but also semi-automatic pistols. It is the first time such a bill has passed a floor vote at the legislature, thanks to a Democratic majority. It's not clear whether Democrats can get the proposal through the House before the Washington state legislature session ends on March 10th. A judge has restored endangered species protections for gray wolves in much of the United States, but not parts of Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming. The ruling reverses a decision to delist wolves in the waning days of the Trump administration. The federal judge found the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service failed to show most wolf populations could sustain themselves without the protections. Wildlife advocates had pushed for the change in part as a result of state-sponsored hunts in places like Idaho and Montana. But the judge said those populations in the northern Rockies are robust enough to bounce back from intensive hunting and will remain under state management. Wolf reintroduction has always been a contentious issue. As we reported last year, Idaho lawmakers authorized hunters to use expanded means to kill an unlimited number of wolves in order to cull up to 90% of the state's wolf population. They also approved money to pay hunters for their wolf kills. The call comes after hunters and ranchers complained about the impact of the growing wolf population on big game and livestock.
You know, encounters between coyotes and dogs can happen at any time of year. And coyotes can always pose a risk to dogs in situations where they view the dog as either prey or competition.
That risk is elevated during mating season in February and March.
Dominant males are primed to protect their territory, and so the younger non-dominant males are out, looking for mates. So during this time of year, coyotes are more likely to view domestic dogs as competition with that increased territoriality.
The Boise foothills and places like Holes Gulch and Military Reserve are prime coyote habitats. Fish and Game recommends that homeowners in the area coyote-proof their yards.
Remove attractants, right? So the things we identify as attractants, pet food, trash, even dog feces, bird feeders attract all kinds of wildlife, not just birds.
Recreationists using the foothills trail system should also be prepared for coyote encounters.
When you're in these areas where there's coyote activity, even if it's an off-leash area, it might be a good idea to walk your dog on a leash during that time. Consider bringing a noisemaker, a whistle, a bell, a horn, something along those lines that can be useful in scaring off a coyote.
And always remember, these are unpredictable wild animals.
Part of the beauty of living in the Boise area is being able to enjoy the nature that surrounds us, and living on the edge of the untamed has its benefits, and we have to take some precautions as well. So respect the wildlife when you're out there. That applies not just to coyotes, but to just about everything. Keep them wild, give animals their space, and enjoy the wonderful resource that we have here in the Treasure Valley.
Lindsay Amundsen, Idaho News 6.
We'll be right back. The Idaho News 6 Ski Report, brought to you by Larry Miller Subaru.
All right, everybody knows we haven't had much snow in a long time. Might have a little bit of snow coming in on Monday through Wednesday of next week. Not a lot, a few inches, but Bogus Basin could use some new snow. It has been mild. 78 of 89 trails open. Tamarack Resort, 46 trails with 6 lifts. They've got a 62-inch blanket of snow at the top of the mountain. Brundage Mountain is 67 inches. It's 100% open. The skiing has been great. The Groom Trails have been amazing at all ski resorts. Sun Valley, of course, they've been adding snow because they make snow. 100 trails, 12 lifts, 86 inches at the top of the mountain. Pomerol Resort has a 58-inch base. Magic Mountain, a 60-inch base. They're open Thursday through Sunday. And don't forget, Soldier Mountain is closed today, the 10th through the 13th, for maintenance on their lift. They're hoping to open up next week. You can go online to check that out on Facebook to check it out. You can also do tubing at Gateway Park's Tubing Hill at Eagle Island.
Magic Valley healthcare workers and community leaders continue their efforts in providing residents who identify as Hispanic or Latino access to resources. After noticing public health needs weren't being met, a Hispanic coalition was formed to find solutions. First steps included understanding cultural perspectives and how underserved communities prefer to access information.
What can we do to make sure that our residents across the board are getting enough access to information and resources that will help keep them safe, keep them healthy, and then extend their life in a meaningful way?
One of the biggest barriers Spanish speakers face is not having access to materials in their language.
Materials are almost always developed in English first, and then a couple of weeks later, we might get a Spanish translation. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the Spanish translation never comes down.
And when that happens, coalition members work to ensure the educational information is translated and distributed. While the purpose of the coalition was to provide needed COVID-19 information to their Spanish-speaking residents, members are also focusing on the significance behind community health. Evelyn Avitia, Idaho News 6.
Well, do you know someone who deserves to be recognized for the good they do in the world? Idaho News 6 wants to help. Our Shine a Light program highlights outstanding people and businesses in our community. To nominate someone, just head to our website, idahonews6.com, and click on the Shine a Light tab at the top of the page. We'll feature award recipients on the third Wednesday of each month, online and on air. Together, we can shine a light and make our community a better place to live.
The Idaho News 6 Tower Cam Network is sponsored by Bronco Motors Hyundai,